2024 has been a pretty good year for survival games already, with the likes of Power World blowing up to heights no one ever expected, and then shortly after, Enshrouded coming out and also being pretty successful in its own right. But we're actually getting a survival game next month that I'm much more excited for than any other survival games of this year. This game being Nightingale. Now, Nightingale is a PvE open world survival crafting game that you can play solo or with parties of up to 6 people, and there's also a shared world element so you can see other players outside of your party of up to 6. And one of the first things you'll notice with Nightingale is that there's a story being told, and there's quite a lot of background lore and world building, and one of the reasons for this is this game is being made by a lot of ex-BioWare developers. And I think that's one of the most exciting parts for me, or at least one of the most interesting parts, because a lot of other survival games, in fact I think a majority of the survival game genre, usually don't have much story being told or much world building. It's usually just you're thrown in a world and it's a survival game. Rust doesn't have any world building. Ark has a little bit, but it took years to get a little bit. Power World basically has none. Enshrouded has a little bit. None of these survival games really have a big emphasis on this, but Nightingale is really leaning in to this world building. And Nightingale has a lot of similar elements you'll find in a lot of other survival games. You'll have to survive through these different Fey worlds where you can come across forests or swamps or deserts, all while you'll be gathering different resources, harvesting ore, cutting down trees, which will allow you to craft different pieces of equipment, different armor, different tools, weapons, even guns, and you'll also be able to use these resources to build your own base, even build massive communities with other players. Because even though you're only able to party up with 6 players, you'll still be able to see other players around. So you may want to build a massive community. And a lot of the building elements and aesthetics and graphics of Nightingale are just really unique and quite interesting. So making massive bases or communities in this aesthetic just looks like it's going to be really cool. And what would a survival game be without having to fight enemies to actually survive? And you'll come across all different types of creatures and monsters, including a faction called the Bound, which is kind of like the main enemy faction of the game that's also going to send raiding parties to attack your base. So your bases aren't just going to be something cool that you build to have your own houses. You're actually going to need to build defenses for your bases, or the Bound's just going to come and destroy your settlements. And you'll have a multitude of ways to fight against these Bound. You'll have melee weapons, you'll have guns, and you'll also have an enchantment system that allows you to enchant your weapons. And this is how the magic system of Nightingale is going to work. You put these enchants on your weapons, and then you're able to use magic through that enchantment. It's a really grounded way to make a magic system. Instead of you, the character, just learning magic and being able to create a fireball, you're instead going to be putting magic into your weapon that holds that magic, and you kind of pull the magic out of the weapon to cast a different ability, or your weapon will have different effects on it itself. So you're going to be gathering, crafting, fighting, building your own bases, but a big question is, where are you going to be doing all of this? And that's where one of the most unique parts of Nightingale comes into play. Because in Nightingale, you're not just going to be on one set map. You're actually going to be exploring procedurally generated worlds where you have an input on how those worlds are created through the use of realm cards. Now, realm cards are going to be your main way of exploring new lands and progressing throughout the game, getting higher tier resources to be able to craft yourself better armor and better weapons. But you're also going to be facing more and more dangerous creatures. Now, realm cards come in 3 different types: biome cards, major cards, and minor cards. So once you get some of these different cards, you're going to put them into this machine, and then a portal is going to open up where you'll be able to enter the realm you just procedurally created, and it's going to take those cards and the information on those cards and build this world with those. So say if you put in a forest biome card, when you enter that portal, it's going to be a forest biome. But then let's say you add a major card that's called the hunt. So now that realm you go into is going to have a big focus on hunting these mythical creatures. Or maybe you put a major card in that makes the realm much more peaceful and more resource rich. So now wow, this is going to be a realm that you want to go into, just harvest yourself some resources. And then maybe you could put in a minor card that means the sun never sets. You don't like a nighttime map. So there's going to be a ton of different possibilities of basically creating your own worlds within the bounds of the game using these different cards. And as you progress further and further into the game, you're going to continue to unlock more and more cards. And as you unlock more and more cards and start stacking them up, you're going to get higher and higher tier of realms that are going to have higher resources, that are going to have more dangerous monsters, and that's going to be a main way you progress throughout the game. Now, these realms you create aren't going to be permanent, because once that portal closes to that realm is gone forever. You could put in the same cards and get a realm very similar to that, but as it's procedurally generated, you're never going to go back to the exact same realm, except for choosing your respite realm. Because as this is a survival game and you're going to be base building, you can't be building your base on a realm that's going to disappear. So every player gets to choose one respite realm, and that realm becomes permanent for you, and it will never close. You can go build your base there, and you can always go back to your respite realm, continue progressing in that realm, and building up your base. But this also ties into multiplayer play, because other players you're playing with, say you have a group of 6 friends, all of you could choose the exact same respite realm, and you could all build up a massive community on that permanent realm. But if you say change to another respite realm, that realm would then close if you were the only one building in it. But if you unchanged and your friends are still in that realm would still be open for you to go back and visit until your friends decide to close that realm as well. Now, there is actually a main objective you're searching for when going through all these different Fey realms, and that's to find the mystical city of Nightingale, which is the last bastion of humanity within the world of Nightingale. But this city is not going to be in the game at first, because this game is launching into early access, but sometime within early access, the main city is going to be active, and that's going to be kind of the main story you're going through until you get to the city. But that's not where the story actually ends, because the developers have mentioned that they're going to continue developing this game past that point. So you're probably going to get to this big main city, and then there's going to be other things for you to do, other stories to be told past that point as well. Now, this already seems like a lot of content for an early access game. It does also seem there's going to be some more replayable endgame content within the game as well on early access launch. And there's a couple different things I could glean from some interviews and some previews of the game, because these haven't been specifically explained by the developers yet. But one of the first things are called Site of Powers, which seem to be some type of mini dungeon where you need a certain power level to be able to go into to complete, and completing these rewards you with things like new realm cards. Now, I'm not sure if these will specifically be considered endgame, but it does seem like these will be something you'll be doing throughout the entirety of the game, including into the endgame. But then there's 2 other systems that seem to be the more replayable endgame pieces of content. First off being Apex creature hunts, which seem to be endgame boss hunts where it ends in these massive open world boss battles. And you can actually see this in a bunch of different footage. There are these massive titanic creatures you can find in these different realms, and it seems that these are going to be an endgame system of hunting down these massive creatures and defeating them for probably really high tier loot. And depending on how they create a system like this could be a really interesting endgame system. I'm almost thinking of adding in a little bit of Monster Hunter into the game, where you're searching for all these massive creatures, trying to find them, then defeating them for maybe even specific loot from the different creatures you're defeating. And then the other endgame system are called Vault. Now, these seem to be more dungeon style of content. I think it was even mentioned that they were inspired by something like Destiny 2 Strikes when being built. They're specifically made to be done in groups, and they're also procedurally generated that also seem to include things like different puzzles you have to complete to continue throughout that dungeon. And it also seems these end in an Apex boss fight as well, but it doesn't seem like these are specifically going to be Apex creatures. So what it's seeming to be, in the open world, you'll be doing the Apex creature hunts where you're searching for these massive creatures, but within the vault, it seems like you'll be facing other types of enemies as the Apex apex bosses. And I think these vaults could turn out to be something very interesting and replayable, because if they're inspired by Destiny 2 Strikes, but also procedurally generated, that could make for a massive amount of replayability, especially if it adds in some interesting puzzles and interesting and difficult boss fights at the end. This could truly add a pretty robust endgame into a PvE survival game, which we really haven't seen a lot of up until this point. But I think that's a pretty good overview of most of the information we have for Nightingale, and I'm incredibly excited for this game. It's seeming to be a very interesting survival game with a lot of unique elements, and in my opinion, a really cool graphical style. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.